Yes, this is The Clash, a moment in the show in which we tackle a major news story of the day from multiple points of view. According to a poll by Redfield and Wilton Strategies, the Prime Minister appears to have put the Partygate scandal behind him. His perceived strong performance in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine has seen his personal approval ratings jump by 11% in just a week, although the Conservatives do still trail the Labour Party anywhere between 3 and 8 percentage points, depending on which poll you look at. But it's clearly a boost for the PM. Here is Chris Curtis, head of political polling at Opinion Research, speaking to our very own Tom Harwood earlier today.
Going to see some more polls out in the coming days, but I think initially it does show that Boris Johnson's approval ratings look like they're going to bounce back in response to Ukraine. I suppose to a certain extent that should be expected. It moves the conversation away from Partygate and towards an area that's a lot better for the Conservatives and the Conservative Party brand, defence and national security. And also it gives the Prime Minister the opportunity to look prime ministerial and strong again after those scandals that have plagued his leadership.
So do these personal poll numbers suggest that Boris has bounced back from the worst crisis of his premiership? Is talk of a leadership contest now out of the window? And is Boris Johnson here to stay? Could Ukraine be his Falklands moment? Well, you know I love hearing what you have to say, so drop me a line right now, mark@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBNews and do vote in our Twitter poll. But first, to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome journalist and social commentator Angela Epstein. Great to see you again, Angela. Broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov. I've been a fan of Nina's for a long, long time. And a good friend of mine, political commentator Suzanne Evans. Nina, if I could start with you, is Boris here to stay?
Well, I sincerely hope not. The fact is that polls can say anything, and he's still way below. And people do not forget that easily. He is a man who's created a government that has produced such appalling results. We have a defence secretary who was completely humiliated in Moscow, who can't tell the Baltic from the Black Sea. You had the previous one who presided over the disaster of Afghanistan while being on the beach, and is now the deputy prime minister. So this is just a government that's just awful, and it's completely his fault because this is what he's chosen. Plus, he has, watching Zelensky in Parliament today, broadcast in Parliament, there is a man, there is a leader. He has morals, he has honour, he has courage. And I look at Boris, the greased piglet, and he must have been almost hoping for this war to happen so that he could move into his Thatcher moment. I mean, if he could have got himself into the blue frock and the pearls and stood in a tank, I'm sure he'd have tried it. People will also not forget what he did. They say Partygate, who cares about it? There's far greater things to worry about. But Partygate goes to the heart of who he is, and he absolutely cheated on this country. He cheated on this country by cheating on the laws that he made himself. And all the hundreds of thousands of people who have been bereaved will never forget, and the rest of us won't forget either.
Suzanne Evans, is Nina Mishkov right? Is Boris Johnson still damaged goods?
Well, I think Nina's right and wrong. I think to say that Boris Johnson wanted this war to save his reputation is a quite ridiculous thing to say, to be honest. But there's no doubt that after Partygate, where his poll ratings were absolutely at rock bottom, and if you look at the progress of the opinion polls over the whole COVID pandemic and going forward to the war in Ukraine, that was absolutely his low point. And I agree, it's a complete scandal. I think I'm with what Dawn Neeson said earlier on that one. I'm not quite sure I can personally forgive him for that one. But now there's no doubt that this war has come along. As you say, it is in a sense his Falkland moment. There is nothing like a crisis to actually give a leader a renewed sense of purpose and a new moral mission. And there's no doubt that that's done that. And to be fair, as someone who's been critical of Boris Johnson in the past, he has risen to the challenge on this. There's no doubt about that. He was leading, in a sense, the world response to sanctions on Ukraine. He was the one pushing for the ban on the SWIFT financial transactions. He was the one that that Britain's already done quite a lot since the Salisbury poisoning in 2018. Britain has been pretty much at the forefront, really, of giving support to the Ukrainian army. I've trained, I think, 22,000 troops, among other things. So he's looking like he's got a good track record on this, although, of course, that's probably not his decision alone. I think he is coming out of the woods. That leadership talk is not going to be happening when you're in a war situation. That has definitely been kicked into the long grass. Of course, the big question is, what happens when, hopefully, this war is over, party politics starts to resume as normal? Will the knives then come out for Boris Johnson again? That remains to be seen. But at the moment, I think all talk of that is completely dead in the water.
Angela Epstein.
I loathe this game of competitive suffering and all the badging of, is it his Falklands moment? Is it his Mrs. Thatcher moment? It's a world global crisis moment. You know, we've been talking about teetering on the brink of nuclear war. Is it World War III? The ramifications of this crisis, without wishing to catastrophize, are massive. And the idea of debating tea and cake and Prosecco, whilst absolutely understanding the heartache that was caused by the flouting of the rules from those who experienced, terrible deprivation and being separated from their relatives, completely understand it, completely understand the optics of it and all of those things. But at the moment, we need a leader who can step up and lead front and centre, consolidate his credentials as an international statesman, lead the global effort to bring down Putin. We've not had the conclusion of the Sue Gray report. We've not had the completion of the investigation by the Met. All of these things are not, like I say, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that, one good, one bad, or we debate one at the exclusion of another. But at this moment in time, at the point of sale, we need a leader who can function on the world stage. What we think about him before or afterwards, Churchill was very unpopular before the war and after the war, but boy, did we need him during the war to stave off Hitler. So I think it's I understand all the concerns about Boris, but I think what will happen is we will judge it in the context of how this awful situation plays out. And at the moment, I think we have a leader with credibility, who is visiting other world leaders, who's got his 6-point plan, which may be more soundbite than actual practical consideration. But who would fill the vacuum anyway? I mean, we don't need to be diverted by a leadership contest, but if we were, which would be the stupidest thing that anybody could do at the moment, who would fill that vacuum anyway?
What a damning indictment that after 11 or how many years it is that the Conservatives have been in power, there is nobody, they can't field a single person that could be a leader. It's absolutely shocking. But while we're talking about Boris leading the way, his 6-point plan is piffle, basically, as probably in his words. He also is a disgrace in that he hasn't got a minister in Priti Patel who has a shred of humanity. We are an absolute disgrace as far as taking in Ukrainian refugees. It's shocking. Added to which, Boris is so mired in his neck up to here with rubles. And, Abramovich is all of these plutocrats, all these oligarchs are being given plenty of chance to slide away, to sell their properties, to get the money. Is Boris going to give back the £2 million that has been donated to the Conservative Party in the last 2 years? I think probably not. We want a leader we can trust who can actually lead. We don't want a karaoke Churchill. This is just ridiculous.
Nina. The Conservative Party and the Cabinet in particular is overflowing with potential candidates to be Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak, Ben Wallace, who has been incredibly decisive and shown great leadership in these short 2 weeks of war. What about our trade deal queen, Liz Truss, who has wowed the country with her trade deals in the course of
wowed the country
renewed freedom.
Wowed the country with her Instagram pictures. And I said, can't tell the difference between the Baltic and the Black Sea. Was completely humiliated in Moscow, and in fact was mentioned by Putin as one of the people who's kind of escalating things by actually sort of supporting people who wanted to go and fight as mercenaries. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
Now, Nina,
let's
talk about the Prime Minister. I agree with you that Partygate was a disgrace. I await the conclusions of it, but it was clearly a chaotic situation at number 10 and deeply hypocritical. I'll give you that. But I would take a chaotic Prime Minister as long as he's somebody that makes the right judgment call. And this is a Prime Minister that kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10. He's got a mandate to lead for 5 years. He got Brexit done. He ended our Brexit purgatory, didn't he? Also, he ignored sage scientists. He didn't cancel Christmas. Cases fell. He was responsible for Freedom Day. This is a Prime Minister that gets the big calls right.
None of these things will I applaud, and certainly not Brexit. And we're talking about COVID, and cases have gone up, deaths have gone up by 10% in the last week. So it's not over. Just because it's not being reported on a daily basis doesn't mean it's gone. And if you read the Mail online today, you will see the deaths have gone up.
Nina Mishkov, Sage told the Prime Minister that there would be 6,000 deaths from Omicron a day if he didn't cancel Christmas.
I'm not here to defend Sage. I'm here to talk about Boris Johnson.
Well, he ignored Sage and he was proved right. That's my kind of Prime Minister.
Well, that's entirely up to you. As far as I know, this is still a democracy. We can all make our own choices. But I choose not. And I think there are a lot of people who don't choose. Like we were talking about, started this debate with polls. The latest YouGov poll showed that people still think that Boris is 69% of people think that he's indecisive for a start. You don't want he dithers, he blusters, and then he finally makes a decision. You don't need an indecisive leader. Back in November, Boris Johnson stood up in Parliament on his hind legs and in trying to justify money for more cyber defence, which is a perfectly valid thing. He said, "I think we're all just going to have to realise that a land war in Europe is never going to happen again." Now, that was November. He's a historian. He's a politician. He could have seen this coming. But he stood there only 3 months ago and said there won't be a land war in Europe.
Well, what about the leader of the opposition who campaigned for the Kremlin-loving Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, a man who sided with the Russians over the Salisbury attack?
Nobody's... Who would have...
That's much worse, isn't it?
I didn't... No, it's not. I didn't vote for Corbyn. I would never vote for Corbyn. Corbyn was one of the two big disasters that happened to our country in 2019. One was Jeremy Corbyn. The other was Boris Johnson. And Keith Starmer, as a Labour Party member, the only way he could get to a position of leadership was to join the Labour Party and to work himself up. Well, that's what they all do. Doesn't mean to say that he wanted... He spent his time getting rid of Corbyn, saying, "I am not Corbyn. I do not believe what Corbyn thinks."
Before trying to get Jeremy Corbyn elected as Prime Minister and being the architect of Labour's Brexit policy, which lost them the election. Look, Suzanne, what do you think about this? What are the percentage chances of Boris Johnson leading the Tories into the next election?
0.
It's quite some way off, but I think it's probably quite high, I suspect. It's interesting, Nina was quoting polls saying that people don't trust Boris. If you look today at the latest YouGov poll, actually he is now a more popular choice for PM than Keir Starmer. I think Boris, 39% of people would choose Boris Johnson, whereas only 35% of people would choose Keir Starmer. So certainly if there was a general election tomorrow, I don't have any doubt, actually, that Boris Johnson would be returned to number 10 Downing Street. This is the way it is. This is how politics works. Leaders come, they go, they have peaks, they have troughs. Boris Johnson is arguably one of the most Teflon of the lot. He's had more lives than a cat. He seems to bounce back at every opportunity. And as I say, it's been shown time and time again throughout history. There is nothing better, very cynically, and I wish I didn't have to say these words, but very often there is nothing better than a war to give an opportunity for a leader to respond and to boost his popularity ratings. But as I said before, to suggest that Boris Johnson did that deliberately is ridiculous.
Briefly, Angela Epstein, do you think that Ukraine will save Boris Johnson, and do you think he can recalibrate and reset his premiership and become a great Prime Minister?
Well, I hope it can. I mean, he exercises and energises people in equal measure. But what we're seeing now is the most terrible human catastrophe. We're seeing innocent people being slain, blood being shed, and it's all so stupid and so needless. And if that doesn't press the reset button on all of us to think about what's important in life, the sanctity of human life, the brevity of human life, and to understand that as human beings, I mean, I don't wish to sound woolly, but these are the things that matter more than anything else. And if Boris Johnson has an opportunity as our leader, the leader of this country, to have a ringside seat as well as an influential role in the suffering that's going on in Ukraine, I sincerely hope that that is enough to focus the mind on somebody who has the privilege of leading this country into being the best prime minister that they can be.
Briefly, Nina Mishkov, do you think Boris Johnson leads the Tories into the next election?
Zero chance of that. Zero chance of that. I'm convinced he won't.
Is that wishful thinking on your part?
It's wishful thinking on my part, but I think people are not stupid. People will have seen through him. And what's more, this war, which is supposed to be assisting him, that's what we're discussing, what he has failed to recognise that everybody has been thinking like Angela does, like everybody does, as a human being. And the amount of money that the British public are wonderful. They've always given, so much money, even when they can't afford it. They've given, such a huge amount of money, and they care about it. And yet, this government, this Prime Minister, and Priti Patel will not open our borders to these people. It's an absolute disgrace. It's a shame. We are the shame of the world, and he leads the government, and the blame must fall on him.
My deep thanks to social commentator Angela Epstein, broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov, and political commentator Suzanne Evans. Thank you so much for your time. A fascinating conversation. Well, what do you think? Mick on email says Boris never really went away over Partygate. He's a natural leader. The next election will, in my humble opinion, be another landslide. But John on Twitter says Boris will be annihilated at the next election. So he backs up what Nina had to say there. He'll be annihilated if he's still hanging around like a very bad smell. He is utterly atrocious. And finally, Yvonne on email says, I think Boris is doing a brilliant job. I dread to think what it would be like with Starmer. Well, your verdict is in terms of our Twitter polls. 78% of you take the view that Boris is going nowhere. That's right, 78% of you back Boris. 22% say the Prime Minister may still lose his job. Well, it's all about opinions. Lots more to come.